First of all, it is International Men's Day today, so wishes around that. A warm welcome to all of you from Interweave Consulting. And whether you've joined in your capacity as an HR, DEI, or business leader, or simply as a dad who wants to learn, or maybe as both, we're very, very happy that you've taken out the time to join us today. A very, very warm welcome to all of you from here, entire team at Interweave Consulting. And why are we here today? We're here today really because we are today at a stage where the idea of fatherhood is rapidly evolving. What men want for themselves as fathers, as well as I'm just going to take a minute to mute, folks. May I also just make a request again for people to mute themselves? Rakesh, could I also please request you to do that? Rakesh or Lekha, if either of you could please put participants, that would be great. Yeah. So as I mentioned, the idea of what fatherhood should be like is rapidly changing. And this is both in terms of men's own expectations of themselves and families' expectations from the men, inside those families. Partly because our society itself is changing. We're on the stage where nuclear families are rapidly becoming the norm rather the exception. So much smaller families, dual parents working in many, many families. So the expectations naturally of what parenthood should be like is, evolving very rapidly. And what does that really mean for organizations who have historically supported mothers at work, but gradually need to start having more conversations with fathers as well? We thought this is really the right time to explore that. As an inclusion solutions company, we have been having a lot of conversations with HR, DEI, business leaders across industry. And definitely one of the things that emerges from this conversation is that the time is right now for India to engage more deeply. And if we want to create inclusive organizations, to really be inclusive of all parents and really broaden the conversation when we talk about parents at work and enabling everybody to thrive. So that's the context for why we are here today. And of course, we're really looking forward to learn from our panel. And it's also my pleasure today to announce the launch of our new offerings in this space, where we have now our interactive workshops around navigating fatherhood, meant for both new dads at work and for managers to engage a lot more empathetically with new dads, as well as provide them the practical support that they may need at this very important stage in their lives. And of course, at Interweave here, we also work in the space of policy review, where we help make parental policies more empathetic and inclusive of all parents rather than just a compliance framework. With that, let me dive into introducing my panelists for today. A pleasure to have you all. And I'm going to sort of go in the order of their introduction to parenthood. So we'll start with Sajid. Sajid TC is a veteran dad with a 27-year-old grown-up daughter. And he is CHRO at Quest Corp and a strategic thought leader with 3 decades of transformation experience in many industries, whether it is oil and steel, telecom, technology, finance, or aviation. And a seasoned practitioner in the DEI space, he has really championed the institutionalizing of empathy-laced business partnering across his various roles. And certified ICF coach, he is also formerly a director on the board of the Kempegowda International Airport Foundation. Welcome, Sajid. Lovely to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
The next person I have with me is Raghu Krishnan. Raghu is father to both a teenager and a 6-year-old. And presently, he is the chief editor, print and publishing, and a senior vice president at Happiest Health. An editorial leader and content expert with nearly 3 decades of experience in both startups and large orgs, he has held senior editorial leadership positions across publications like ET and Business Standard. And he has a keen understanding of the intersection of technology, science, and business with its impact on society. Welcome, Raghu. My third panelist with me today is Saurabh Nigam. Saurabh is father to a 7-year-old and a seasoned HR leader and a strategist with close to 2 decades of experience in early stage and high growth orgs. He's a results driven professional with a focus on strategic people practices that accelerate business growth and impact. And he's recognized as a top LinkedIn voice and authors one of the top HR newsletters on the platform. And his LinkedIn profile proudly includes dad among his key descriptors. Welcome, Saurabh. Lovely to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
And finally, moderating the panel, that's me, Aparna Vedapuri Singh, your host for today. I am mom to an almost 3-year-old. So I'm the latest entrant here to the Parenthood Club. And of course, learning from all the parents around me and enjoying the experience thoroughly. Work-wise, I'm a senior consultant, diversity and inclusion at Interweave Consulting. And I come with a long history of leading women's communities digitally. So let's dive in. And what we'll do first is I have a few questions which I will ask all three of my panelists to weigh in on, and then we may have a few questions for you based on your own unique experiences, right? So Sajid, may I request you to start us off? The first topic which I really wanted to all of us to together reflect on is what does it mean to you to be an ideal dad, or if I may use the word, even a perfect dad? Is there such a thing? And also, how do you see that having evolved, say, from the time when you were a child being parented to a father, and how do you also see some of that generational change playing out in workplaces?
Okay, I'll start with the fact that it's genuinely the term fatherhood has evolved. I still remember when I was a child. I'll start from there. Parents were kinds of the center of your universe, be it for information, be it for anything else. Everything began and ended with your father and your mother, So that I would use partly as a fatherhood base. Today, we've reached a level where we are just points of references or reconfirmation, because information is available to everybody as a parent, So it is at two levels. One is for the emotional quotient or for the confirmation of information and clarification. And of course, from the financial and emotional perspective, we now need to be the safety net that the trapeze artists use. In case I fall, I expect you to be there to take care of me. Else, allow me to be. So that's the evolution we've seen from the time that we were children to the present generation of children.
And how do you see some of that, playing out in the workplace in terms of if there are dads coming from very different generations, and of course, we bring in our whole selves to the workplace. Do you see any, potential or even areas of intergenerational conflict in terms of how we approach our lives and bring that into the workplace as fathers or mothers for that matter?
Yeah, I guess the Gen Ys and the Gen Zs are far more balanced in their approach to being parents and being professionals, as against which probably the Gen Xs and to some extent the Gen Ys thought that work was worship and family could take a second seat, in a back seat, So I think that's a change that we are seeing. And I'd again like to attribute this partially to the electronic connectivity that we have with our families at all times. There is a far more higher level of involvement, participation, and, what is the word for it? Being completely connected at all times, which was non-existent for us Gen Xs for a long time. So I guess the lifestyles of people have also forced parents to be connected 24/7 in that sense. So that also applies to people at work.
Raghu, as somebody, who is a dad, an editor, a business leader, but also somebody who's a keen observer of societal trends, right? Can I ask you to reflect on this question? How do you see the evolution of, what it means to be an ideal dad changing, and what does it really mean for the workplace? You're on mute, huh? You need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
As Sajid said, communication channels have actually opened up. One, when we were young, we were, as I say, world revolved around our parents. Today, our children are more exposed to the world. Even in the workplace, they're more aware of what rights they have, and they actually expect us to be friends, colleagues, than just a schoolmaster with a stick. And I think it's happening because of increasingly uh, children also are seeing mothers working, parents helping their fathers, helping their mothers at home, and they expect it's not just one person working for home, but it's our family that's working together.
Saurabh, anything you'd like to add on to that?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, great thoughts, Sajid and Raghu. And to be honest, as the second youngest dad on the panel here, and I'm going to take the liberty to, kind of tie these two things here, which is partly because of the socio-economic change which the country has seen over last 20, 30 years, and partly because of the availability of information, which Sajid rightly pointed out. I think the fundamental shift which has taken place between the time when we saw parenthood as children versus what we see as parents to our kids is is at two levels, right? One, while growing up, it was almost like a given that your single source of information was your parents, right? Whether right or wrong, that's we're not obviously debating there. And what that transpired into is that it almost came to a situation where your worldview was through your parents, right? And I think where what that basically meant that, for lack of a better word, there was a clear hierarchy, right? So they were parents and they were kids, right? And you will never change that hierarchy, and rightly so. I think fast forward 40 odd years, what is really transpiring now is you're almost partners, right? As your kids are growing up, and you're partnering with them through their growth and evolution. Because as both Sajid and Raghu pointed out, information is right there available. They're not really leaning on parents for information as kids are growing up. And I'm talking about my 8-year-old right now, right? And I can only visualize what it would be for Sajid, you with a 27-year-old at home, right? So and therefore that shift in the mindset of parents as well has to happen, where it's not really just top down, it's not really just hierarchical. You need to be able to recognize that there will come a point of time where you need to be at almost like equal power with your kids, helping them navigate through this variety of options which the life presents, or which and a professional world presents to you. I think that's a fundamental shift which I am seeing and I'm still grappling with. I'm still figuring out how to manage that, to be honest. But to me, that's really, really fundamental at this point of time.
No, absolutely. And as mom to a 3-year-old here, right, I can see the way in which my child is able to articulate even at this young age his thoughts and come back to me with certain things saying, no, why not? Why should I not do this, right? And what is interesting for me is also to look at the workplace and say that if these are the children who are increasingly growing up in non-hierarchical, more democratic spaces where the role of parents is also changing, then obviously their expectations from managers and the workplace is also going to be very, very different. And possibly that accounts for, many of the conversations that we see today around, oh, Gen X expectations were this way and Gen Z expectations are so different. And it's not just Gen Z which needs to learn to work in the workplace. All of us who are business leaders and hailing possibly from a Gen X or Y, we need to reorient ourselves too, not just as parents, but also working with a lot of younger people in the workplace today who are going to be, say, the parents of the next 5 years, 7 years, and so on. What does that really mean for us to meet their expectations as working parents, right? And that's going to be a topic we come to a little later in this session as well. But before we get there, Saurabh, can I ask you to, continue and tell us, I love to hear good stories, and parenthood is always a rich mine of stories. So tell us something from your own life which really illustrates for you what it means to be an involved dad today, since we're talking about changing notions of fatherhood.
Yeah. So, my father served the Indian Army for 40 odd years, right? Which basically meant that discipline was really the middle name out there while growing up, right? And discipline in a true 4G style, as they call it, right? And there are definite positives to it, and there are certain things which were absolute okay, and there were things which were absolute not okay, and that's really how the childhood was all about. And I certainly feel that, fast forward 40 odd years, that fundamental tenet of bringing up a kid hasn't really changed. What really is transforming, and as we spoke about in the first section of this conversation, is that how do you balance it out with the fact that the kids are far more aware, far more knowledge savvy, because they have access to that. And therefore, how do you draw the line in terms of letting them be versus having having that discipline out there called out? And to me, that's the one of the most fascinating challenges I encounter pretty much day in and day out, which is how to be a friend to a Meher while being a person who draws the line for her as well, because there are certain parts of hers which still doesn't understand what's okay and what's not okay, right? And to me, it's an evolving thing. So what it was for us, it was very clear that you were told what is okay and what's not okay, and then you abided by those lines. Here, you're really towing the line, partnering with your kid, almost at equal footing, but also figuring out places and nuances where you need to, let the kid know that what's not okay and why. And that why is really the thing, and how do you spell out that why so as to satisfy that inquisitive mind of an 8-year-old. To me is a really, really fascinating challenge, something which obviously I did not encounter growing up, because that's not how the worldview was at that point of time. But today it's changed, right? So to me, balancing that piece is really the challenge which I get most fascinated about.
Raghu, would you like to share what it means for you to be a fully involved dad, and do you have any stories to share with us around that?
I was actually inspired by my father, who was always work obsessed. And the initial years of my work, till the child was born, till my elder one was born, I was completely obsessed with work. I rediscovered myself after my son was born and started enjoying small things, whatever happens in his life as mine, something that I learned. And it's been a fascinating journey being a father. I always tell every single friend who has got a kid saying that you should enjoy your fatherhood. And it's a great experience that you do.
So in a sense, fatherhood itself was a transformative moment for you, where you moved away from work being sort of the end all of
Precisely.
things.
Precisely.
Great.
And I continue to do that. I spend as much time as possible with my children. With the elder one, of course, is overgrown, so has little time, but the younger one keeps me occupied.
Sajid, is there anything that you would like to share? Is there something from your own life which brought home to you what it means to be a truly involved dad?
Yes, I'd like to believe that the child's teenage, which I'm sure my two friends would also be either going through or will go through in future, tells you that there can be a alternate or a better point of view. It's kind of very humbling to realize that, yes, we may not necessarily be perfect when it comes to understanding or interpreting a situation. And the younger minds can sometimes outsmart you in that. And we need to have the humility to be able to learn from them. As a father of a 26-year-old, believe you me, I learn something every day, especially the newer nuances of living in the e-world is something that you need to go back to them. So for a change, I would like to think that partially my life now revolves around her when it comes to validating things about the new age, so that's been my experience.
Having spoken about fatherhood, about your own experiences at a societal level, how things are changing, I'd now like to move the conversation firmly into the world of work, right? Like we discussed, there was a time when the primary duty of father was to be the breadwinner, and therefore work was the primary focus for most men or almost all men. But today that is changing. And what does it mean for organizations? And Sajid, as a extremely seasoned HR leader, I'd like you to weigh in on this first. That what is it that organization in India can do and need to do, going ahead into the future, especially when we consider that more and more of Gen Z folks are actually going to become dads in the next 5 to 10 years, and they are going to be very, very different in their expectations. What are some ongoing initiatives that industry really needs to support fathers at work?
I'll think one of the best things that have happened in the last 5 years, from this perspective of DEI and being fair to all genders and the things, has been the pandemic. That has been the silver lining. It's actually reset most of our value systems, most of our attitudes and approaches to the way we went to work or we looked at work, starting from working from home all the way upwards, which means it also created a certain element of fair playing field for both genders. And the last 5 years, again, like I said, has seen a lot of DEI initiatives that's being taken by most organizations, especially in the corporate world. And for once, the role of a father has also been kind of recognized, and paternity leaves have been brought in to match it, or to a smaller extent, the maternity leaves that the mothers avail. Adoption leaves have been made available to parents now. And so I'd like to think that the last 5 years actually seen substantial improvement in the space, and fathers especially have been at the beneficiary end for this. And I'd like to believe that by 2030, as they say, 35% of your working population would be the Gen Zs. And I expect some element of further improvement. Some of them could probably be very radical in nature, especially looking at the fact that we are also looking at gig working now, which would also mean that many of these concerns of being full-time employees would kind of get neutralized or completely removed. So that's what I'd like to believe has happened in the past and what I foresee in the immediate future.
Saurabh, can I ask you to add on to that?
Yeah, absolutely, Aparna. So
Maybe, I'll just give that a little bit of a twist. Since, we've heard from Sajid on some of the positives, it would be great if you could reflect from your experience on what has gone well and what has been done so far, and also maybe a few things that you think remain to be done.
Sure. So let me start with building on what Sajid said, right? And I'll go by my own example itself. So when I entered parenthood, I had a paternity leave of 10 days. And I was leading HR for the organization where I was working, and it never occurred to me that 10 days of paternity leave is actually grossly unfair on the new dad and the child as well, and obviously the mother. Cut to that 8 years down the line, I mean, it's too heartening. It's really heartening to see that that itself, that transformation and understanding that it's almost an equal responsibility for both parents, and therefore they need time off to adjust to the fact that you have a new life with you, right? So as Sajid said, the most basic element, which is the recognition of the time which is required for a new parent, whether the mother or father, is the biggest positive shift which I've seen over the years in last 8 years of my parenting. And still, I would say it's still work in progress. There's a lot more which can be done there, right? But yeah, it's definitely a positive, significant shift there. Linked to that is the fact that this recognition itself that parenthood is a transformative experience which anybody goes through, and therefore providing that flexibility to individuals as they go through that journey before the kid is born and after. I think I do see that shift also happening and has happened over the years. So to me, those are the two positives which have happened, or at least in my journey of parenting, and still work in progress. I would say there's a lot more which we can do, but yeah, we are at a much better place possibly what we were, and I can only talk about 8 years because that's the time frame I can see at this point of time. If I flip it, right, I do recognize that I think there is still that misunderstanding or lack of understanding, if I may say, which is around what it takes to be a parent. And surprisingly, it's not just amongst individuals who are not yet parents, but also folks who've been parents, right? So how do you make sure that you're accommodating your team members, your colleagues, and adjust your working styles, your ways of working at an individual level, at a team level, at an organization level, to be able to accommodate? I think there's still lots to be done there, right? While I do see that individual level accommodations do get made, but at a systemic level, there's still lots to be done there. And I do feel that we still have some distance to be traveled there. A case in point is all the news which we keep hearing about 84, 90 hours work week to whatnot. I think we're doing a great disservice to the fact that people at different stages of their lives have different requirements, and therefore a cookie cutter approach does not help, and definitely not in terms of folks who are going through a parenthood journey. So to me, that recognition is still a long way to go, and I do hope that some of the smaller steps which we have taken, we build on that and ultimately reach there.
No, that's so true. I mean, a cookie cutter approach in general is a challenge, and especially when we are talking about such a radically transformative experience like parenthood, I think it's doubly hard on anyone going through that experience. Raghu, what would you like to add to that? Is there and maybe since you come from quite a different sector, it would also be good if you could bring in some of your sectoral experience there in terms of what can organizations do differently, or when it comes to how they are enabling dads at work, or whether you've seen some positive examples also, if you could share with us.
I'll divide this into two. One, people who were young parents during the pandemic, and prior to that. Prior to that, people who have been young parents during pandemic are more empathetic to younger parents. And this is I've seen among my colleagues. I've seen having conversations with leaders saying the younger parents who underwent the struggle or enjoyment during the pandemic with young children are more empathetic to younger parents who are having kids now. But people who have, and I'm not pointing with fingers at anyone, but I'm just saying people who had older children still struggle to understand what it would mean to see the shift that's happening. I think it's just that organizations also are flexible enough to empower managers to take the call, as Salo said. It's individually, people are more responsive to helping younger parents.
Yes, I mean, of course, our own experiences also definitely impact how we engage with younger parents in our capacity as managers and leaders. But I think that's also where, of course, what Saurabh spoke about, what is it that we can do at a systemic level? So naturally, when we talk about that, then comes in the question of sensitizing managers, sensitizing everybody to really how parenthood is evolving and why it is more of a shared responsibility today. And many of these accommodations or many of the provisions need not necessarily be restricted to mothers alone. In fact, I have a question which has come into me on chat from Tabassum. And Sajid, maybe you could take this question that do you see any kind of Tabassum, I'm not literally asking your question, I'm just paraphrasing it. Do you see any kind of apprehension or disappointment among men when they see that it is primarily women who are recognized as parents and given the support that they need? How do men feel about it?
If you were to ask me for what I have seen in the last 30 years, I don't think that's really true, because they more often than not, most of the professionals in the corporate sector were kind of guided by their presumed role that they were supposed to play. Now with the movement of being equal partners in looking after the children, see, like you rightly said at the outset, the father was supposed to be the breadwinner once upon a time. We've evolved from there. Today, both parents are on the same footing to be looking after the child and bringing them up. So I don't think there has been any apprehension per se among the fathers. I'd like to believe that I'm echoing this with my other two panelists. It's just an evolution of the roles that we played then and we play today. It'll also, let me give you an example. I'm sure that a couple of decades ago, we had our apprehension when wanting to speak to our fathers. We only went there as an analogy, like the Supreme Court, when all other appeals got overturned. Today, that's not the case. I mean, the gender of the parent, I don't think really in any way impacts the child's approach to getting something or approaching either of the parent. So I think we are more on an even keel now. Don't know if I've answered your question completely.
No, I think so. I mean, it's essentially, maybe it was not there in the past, but I would like to think that it is something we definitely need to do as organizations in the future.
Correct.
Questions around that. I have a few questions for each of you as individuals based on your own experience. And Saurabh, I'll come to you first because I don't think this is a topic that is addressed a lot, especially in the context of dads. Now, when I first looked up your LinkedIn profile, it was very nice to see that, Meher's dad features prominently there in your descriptor. But I did wonder that, what has claiming this identity so vocally meant for you? And have you ever come across any conscious or unconscious bias against dads who are very clearly involved parents, and need not be only dads, could of course be parents in general, but who are very involved and vocally claiming that identity?
Great. First of all, thanks a lot for highlighting that. Meher's father has been my heading on my professional profile, LinkedIn, right from the day Meher was born. And as all of you would recognize, the four of you on the panel, uh, possibly if there's been one biggest transformative experience one has had, it's the day you become a parent, right? And that's how it was. And the reason it went up there was, and obviously this is still work in progress as I would like to believe, and it will remain work in progress for possibly next few years at least, is that pretty much every single life decision, whether in the professional world or in the personal space, it's you start keeping your kid at the center, right? And at least that's how it's been for me. And when that be the case, that almost has to become your identity, number one identity, and that's really how I like to believe. Now, how does it play out vocally is what you asked me, Aparna. And to me, all my conversations, right, it is almost next to impossible for me to not bring in my parenthood, bring in Meher, bring in her interest at the center, vocally, directly, indirectly, right? So, and I do it because that's what it is for me, right? Now, whether it is making a career shift, taking or not taking a career opportunity, or deciding what to do next in my professional work, it really boils down to what would it mean for Meher, how would it impact her. That's really the starting point, and then you start building everything around that. And I don't have any qualms around the fact, because that's how I prioritize, right? And you talked about conscious biases. I think what I have observed, and Sajid pointed out very rightly, not even once I have felt that has gone against me in any of my conversations, any of my dealings. More than and that, in fact, on the contrary, it has always been viewed as positive, because one, I'm always being transparent in terms of why I'm taking a particular decision or why I'm not taking a particular decision for that matter. Uh, and I think that then plays into the fact that it just builds on it, because when you're having that conversation with a fellow parent, then there's a recognition that, hey, listen, what you're saying makes sense, and it's almost similar to me as well, right? So there's a lot of recognition of the fact that what you're saying is true for me as well, for people who are already parents. Folks who are not, or who might reach there at some point in time, for them it's almost like a realization, hey, we're going to get there soon, right? And therefore hearing from you almost kinds of is preparing us for what's coming up. So to me, it's almost actually helped me clear up my mind that, okay, the way I have had my own transformation in this journey has kind of played out in my favor, because every single point in time I've had that conversation or have had those interactions, it's only been positive. I have not had even once a situation where it's gone against me. Hey, listen, why can't you do this, or why can't you take up this assignment just because you can't stay up late, or you have to be back at home at certain time because you have to manage your daughter. It's always been positive. It's always been a situation where folks have recognized that, whether they have been parents or not parents, irrespective of that. So to me, the way I feel it's important it's more important for you to internalize what the transformation has been for you and what your priorities are once you're a parent. And once you do that, I think it's almost like a no-brainer for you to then spell it out to the outside world, so that there's no ambiguity around it.
I really like that point about, that you need to first internalize what it means for you, and then that's what you're really, in a way, putting out into the universe. Though I have to say, I have some reservations about, whether or not the responses may always be so positive. But I think nonetheless, it's a great, it's really great to hear, because I think it's also very encouraging for more new parents to say that, listen, you can claim your whole identity at work, and it's not a problem, or it need not be a problem, and there is a lot more openness around that today. So I think that's a very, very positive thing to hear indeed, Saurabh. Thank you. Raghu, I'll come to you next. You're a dad to a teen and a 6-year-old, so obviously there's some time in between those two fatherhood experiences. And in that time, do you think that workplaces have changed or they've evolved to better meet the needs of parents who, and especially dads who want to be hands-on participants in their children's lives and not just, ringside observers? And did things basically change from the time you were a first time dad around to the second time?
I think organization has always been friendly with parents wherever I've worked. And of course, the profession that I used to work was completely demanding. But yet, your managers were accommodating. And when you tell them that, and as Saurav said, when you tell them that the priority is family and child, your managers distribute and respect the choice. And and that really has worked in my favor, even when 13, 14 years ago, and even now. And I say that my priority is the child, and everyone teams up and says that it's okay, we accommodate it for your work. Yeah. I don't think uh, as managers, and I think even organizations also respect that. And the shift has happened where uh, more younger managers also understand that you need to be hands-on parents, and they are accommodative. Yeah.
And do you think somewhere the fact that as a leader, your priorities clearly put family and child at the center, or as a very, very important part of that circle, do you think that also encourages more younger employees to own that identity?
Precisely. I see that happening in my organization, where youngsters are openly having conversation about parenting and uh, younger parents, and they also clearly define, saying that this is my priority, and please don't disturb me, which is acceptable to every single person.
Sajid, let me come to you and your, experience. I believe that you have had the uncommon experience, still quite relatively less common in India, of as a dad being the primary parent for your child, right?
Right.
And has that, I have two parts to my question really. A, what is it about that you cherish, and B, what has it really taught you about what organizations need to do to enable parents to thrive?
Okay. The first part, like I said, it taught me that there are alternate ways. It also taught me to be a little more sensitive to the needs of the other person. As Indian men, we were not supposed to be sensitive. At least we were not supposed to be seen to be sensitive. We're supposed to be the tough ones. So that's one of the first transformations that we had to go through. Rather, I had to go through to ensure that I genuinely was able to pick up the nuances of the impact of my actions, my words, and therefore be more sensitive. And I'd like to believe that made me a slightly better HR manager as well when I dealt with other human beings. So that's on the first point. Can you just repeat the second part that you asked me, please?
I mean, the second point was, in one sense, you would say that because most mothers have always had to be that, primary caregiver, which is really the person the school calls when the child falls sick, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
they know what it really, really means and what organizations what their expectations from organizations are. But very few dads generally have that experience, or until very recently. So, what has that experience taught you of being the primary caregiver? What has that taught you about what organizations need to do differently?
Correct. So allow me to address the first part about parenting. So except for the biological childbearing, I'd like to believe the rest of parenting is an acquired ability, and gender doesn't really impact it. That's the basic that I again understood. Corporates, again, like I said, it is also more of being an individual and a contributor of the team. It's how much can you prioritize, and like I'll quote what Saurabh said, and how much can you show what your priorities as a professional are. No organization would really want to kind of lose a good professional or be unfair to a professional who's contributing by not being accommodating, for want of a better word, and unique cases. And I'd like to believe that in today's world, most organizations are very sensitive and very, very flexible when it comes to offering opportunities or adjustments for parents who really need that extra effort or time to fend for or take care of their personal requirements. So yes, we've seen an evolution. Okay, I wanted to echo something that earlier both Raghu and Saurabh spoke about. See, again, we were supposed to be operating even as professionals in a different mold. The driven, hard-nosed, no-nonsense boss is dead today. You have to be the sensitive, sensible friend at work, no matter what your designation or level in the hierarchy is. So I think that's been a major transformation that we've seen. And that I'd like to give credit to the organizations for have allowed to let that happen.
Saurabh, you've raised your hand. Do you have a related point to add?
Yeah, definitely would like to add something here. And I'm going to build on the response I gave to you on the question which you asked me, is that, how does it play out and why is it important to, recognize your identity and play it out? As managers, HR professionals, leaders, we often say this to our colleagues and team members: hey, you have an issue or you have a problem or you have a need, come to me, right? Feel free to reach out to me. Nothing wrong with that. But I do believe, and this is through experience, I can firmly say that one part is to say that the more powerful way is to actually demonstrate it. And I've seen that play out in my own case, right? Since the time I've been a parent, and I've been very, very vocal about the fact that I have needs to take care of my child, to be there if my wife is traveling. I have to be at home. I either have to take off, I have to work from home, and we obviously take turns to do that. And I've been extremely vocal about that. What I've seen transpire is it allows people to be that much more comfortable to reach out to me as an HR leader or someone in my team as well. And I think it's important to do that is because whether we like it or not, we have our blind spots and we have our biases as well, right? And I'm going to give you just one example, obviously without revealing identities, right? I used to believe that now I've been a parent for 7-8 years, and therefore I understand what it takes to be a parent, and therefore what kind of needs one has as a parent. Until someone reached out to me in my organization who has a child with special needs, right? And that individual has that colleague of mine had very, very different needs than I had even as a parent, right? Which I would not have recognized until that individual reached out to me, right? And I would like to believe that one of the reasons why the person reached out to me is because I have been extremely vocal about my own needs, and therefore the individual reached out and said, listen, I need to take next 1 month off, right? Because I need to take my child to this place. And I do believe that, all these things add up. And somehow I have come to believe that, while saying is important and it's almost like a starting point, but demonstrating it by your own self and your own actions just takes it to the next level and helps building those bridges and, removing those biases, unconscious biases.
Thanks for sharing that, Saurabh. I truly believe that, inclusive leadership ultimately is about how you're putting yourself out there as well and walking the talk, right? And it's while policy, and process definitely has its place. Ultimately, it's how we as leaders really embody those policies, sensitivities, the values that we claim as organizations. So I think that's really a great point. I have a comment from somebody in the group left to me privately, which talks about, and I'm not very sure whether I have their permission to mention them by name, so I'll just share the comment. It basically says that as men, we are not very comfortable being vulnerable, and that closes a lot of avenues to openly discuss and connect with like-minded dads. There are many groups where new moms connect, and some initiative by companies to help create this support group for dads as well, I'm guessing. So new parents do gain a lot from others' experience. I think that's a very, very valid point, that in a environment where we really don't have as many avenues yet for dads to be part of the conversation, it would be nice if organizations could enable that in a very meaningful way. I think a great comment there. I'd like to now throw it open to our wonderful audience. We've had almost 100 people here today joining us for the panel. If any of you have any questions, comments, anything that you'd like to ask any of our panelists, or even if, like the comment that I just read out, if there's anything that you'd like to share from your own experience, what would be beneficial to you as a dad, or what you've seen in your experience as a manager, that would be lovely to hear. We can have a few minutes for our audience. Please feel free to, you could put your hand up and we'll call on you to speak if you'd like to do that, or you could just share a question in the chat, box here. While we wait for that, I'll, probably come to my last question, which I had for the panelists, and then, I can go back to audience questions and comments if we have any. And this I'd, like to request all the, panel members to really weigh in on it. Sajid, we'll start with you. For years now, the leaky pipeline of women at work in India and, the slow progress of women towards leadership has been, a topic of conversation in industry. Do you see organizational initiatives to really enable dads, as well as the broader societal conversations around, the role of, the rightful role of, fathers in families? Do you see that also as important for enabling women at work?
To a large extent, yes. However, the fathers are not really the ones who would make the difference. It's the societal norms. I call it the 3 M's which withhold the women from in Indian corporates from the scene, which is matrimony, maternity, and motherhood. So because of the societal pressures and because of the societal approach to this entire women empowerment and becoming professionals, there is a high level of societal impediments which prevent them from growing in their scene. So I'd like to think that more than the fathers being responsible, yes, they have a small role to play, but the women as well tend to kind of follow the societal expectations more than anything else. And that at times turns out to be the primary reason why they are unable to grow beyond a point. I'll give you another example. In Tata's, we had actually announced something known as the second innings, wherein we permitted women to take a sabbatical and come back and restart their career. Very, very lukewarm response is what I would like to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need to grow out of the societal apprehensions that we still carry to a large extent. And that probably would be the one major expectation from others.
Raghu, what would you like to say to that in terms of, shared parenting and fathers taking up, a much bigger role as hands-on parents? How do you see that impacting women's careers?
I think if fathers take up more responsibility, and I think we have been discussing that fathers are taking more responsibility, which also helps the women get more opportunities. It's just that we need to be flexible to allow the women in the family to take up more responsibility, which includes if the woman has to travel out of the city for a work for over a period of time. I have a neighbor who has got 2 young children, and the mother of the house got an opportunity to travel overseas for a longer period of time. He took that opportunity to talk to his organization to allow him to be flexible to be with his children so that she can take up the business opportunity. Fathers are doing it, but I think we need to have more people taking up that opportunity.
Saurabh, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, as funny as it may sound, it takes 2 to bring a child into the world, right? And I think that just needs to extend beyond that, where you don't stop by bringing a child into this world. It should automatically take 2 to raise a child as well. And I think that recognition of that, and therefore embodying that in your journey as a parent for fathers, I think is fundamental to making sure that you're enabling mothers to not give up on their careers or professions. Sajid, you're absolutely right. Completely agree with you that we're talking about a much bigger societal change here. But I would like to believe that we are all elements of that society, and the fundamental shift which we can bring in as fathers is to make sure that we are equal partners. You brought in a very beautiful point earlier on as well, that barring that biological piece where technically it's not possible for males to to bring in a child into the world, but other than that, I think pretty much everything you can acquire, provided you're willing to do that. And I think that is the least contribution we can make to bring about a shift in the societal mindset. There's a lot more to be done, but I think as a father, that's the basic, that's the bare minimum we should be aiming at.
So we have a number of interesting questions that have come in. Since we have about 9 minutes and I'd like to stick to our time, I'll just take a few of them. First, Neeti says, would love to hear, and this is, either open to all of you or if, whoever would like to share. Neeti says, would love to hear any best practices followed by different organizations in the area of supporting fathers. Is there a specific process, policy, practice that any of you would like to talk about?
I did speak about the second innings, which was there in the Tatas. We'd also in Bangalore International Airport introduced something known as a positive preference. So wherein we made sure that there was specific support, additional support provided to lady employees, be it at the time of recruitment, be it the time of going on maternity leave, be it at the time of being promoted. So those are specific initiatives we have taken to try and ensure that as fathers, the male parent also did their bit. So that's 2 bits from me.
I have one more question. Okay. Sudhanshu says, it would be very useful if the panelists can share their thoughts on the most important attribute to learn as a parent.
Be patient.
Being patient. Okay. Saurabh, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would say being patient and be a good learner, because parenting is an ongoing journey as a learner. I mean, there is no playbook out there, so you should be ready to imbibe the learnings which comes along the way. There is no right or wrong here. I mean, that to me, that's your ability to absorb, learn, modify along the way as a parent is very, very important.
And also, I want to add one more. Enjoy your parenthood. Often one of the constant grouses from parents is that it's tough. No, it is not. If you enjoy it, it will be really fun.
Bring in the fun. Yeah, that's a good thing to keep in mind. I'll take this final question from Nivya. A very, very interesting question. Would love to know if becoming a father has changed your understanding of masculinity or your identity as a man. Any of our panelists would like to take that?
Okay, being the father of a grown-up daughter, I guess I get a chance to evolve in that even now. So I'd like to think that yes, like I said initially, the men tend to be a little less sensitive as part of their role playing, So being a father actually makes you want to revisit your sensitivity and the ability to understand the other person's point of view, As men, otherwise we tend to believe that what our point of view is the one that needs to kind of be there, be there, done that. So parenthood actually, and fatherhood specifically, little children, believe me, are no respecters of your stature and your this thing. They will tell you as it is. And that I'd like to believe is a great learning as a father.
And fatherhood also allows you to be vulnerable.
Correct.
I don't think men want to be vulnerable, but at least with the child, yes.
I think those are really great things to take back from today's session. As we are approaching the end of the session, I just want to, if all of you are able to look at the chat box, there's a wonderful comment from Nakiran talking about, the equally valid and valuable perspectives of both his parents. I think that really summarizes a lot of what we're talking about today. And of course, if organizations can play a small but meaningful role in making that happen, I think that's really the direction which all of us want to evolve in. Just a few, final observations before we close today's session. First of all, a huge note of thanks for all our three panelists, Sajid, Raghu, and Saurabh, for joining us today. I personally feel that, honest, candid, open conversations around parenthood are rare. And then, fatherhood is still lesser, right? I mean, while there is a lot of conversation around how do we parent, what do we do, what do you feed a child, how do you raise a child, how strict should we be, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of conversation around raising children, but there is very little conversation around how we as parents evolve, and even lesser so around how dads as parents evolve. And I'd like to think that, here at Interweave, we are playing a role in making more of that conversation happen. And of course, as part of our engagement with industry in terms of also really supporting industry in terms of engaging with all parents in a meaningful fashion, and not just with mothers. I see that we have a whiteboard on by mistake. Raju, could I request you to please turn that off? And so it's been a very, very valuable conversation in that sense, listening to all three of you talk about how really the experience has been transformative for you as parents on one end, and on the other side of the spectrum, of course, the organizational perspective, really in terms of both as HR and business leaders, what is it that we can do both as managers and in terms of really evolving organizational policies, culture, process to accommodate the ever-changing needs of our employees today, many of whom are a lot younger and have very different experiences from what we may perhaps have had even 10 years ago. So I think that's a very good point to consider, that both these ends of the spectrum, how they come together, I don't want to use the word collide, but rather come together to really evolve something more meaningful that really enables all of us to build a more inclusive society and not just organizations. It's been wonderful talking to all of you and listening to your perspectives, and also a big note of thanks to all of our audience who stayed with us today. If you'd like to know more about our work in this space and understand what your organization could do, please feel free to write to us at meera@interweavesolutions.in. Lekha or Rakesh, may I request you to just drop our email address in the chat box so that interested folks can connect with us. And once again, thank you all for being an extremely engaged and participative audience today. It's been wonderful interacting with all of you, and we'll stay connected. Thank you so much once again.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Interweave.
And with that, we'll close today's discussion. Pleasure meeting you all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.